Hi, Warrior Families. Mrs. Dial here with this week's update. I wanted to make this week's update more of a frequently asked questions answer session. As you know from my communication this week, it has been a busy week on our campus with COVID. I can tell you it has been a busy week at schools all over Florida and all over the country for COVID. There certainly is community spread in our area and throughout the state. And so that makes for schools being a very busy place with this kind of work this week. So I want to try to communicate as clearly and openly as I can with you about some of the questions that I think you guys have been having this week and some things that we've seen coming in. So one question we've gotten a lot is, if my child has to quarantine, how can they keep learning from home? This is a new challenge for us this year because last year, if we had to put a child in quarantine, we had a telelearning program to plug them into. And so as difficult as it was to run two programs simultaneously last year, it is a new kind of difficult for us this year with not having telelearning and those teachers dedicated to that program. So what will happen is, if your child has to quarantine, you will have a letter sent home from the homeroom teacher, and that will give directions for your child for how to log into Google Classroom to get assignments. You'll have assignments posted there for your child every day that they have to learn from home. Those may be in a folder that says COVID or quarantine or learn from home within Google Classroom. There will also be a link in Google Classroom for your child to do for attendance each day. This link is really important. Every day that your child has to be home, I just need them to fill out this little short Google form, and that will help them be counted as basically present at school for that day. So those absences are not counting against you. It is the same as being at school, as long as your child is participating in the online learning that is being assigned to them through Google Classroom and completing that attendance link. You will have the ability to have a live Google Meet every Wednesday with a teacher for your child's grade level. They can get on and ask questions about assignments. That doesn't mean you have to wait till Wednesday. You can certainly email teachers ahead of time, but there will be the opportunity for a live meet every Wednesday. That may increase. We may change that protocol a little bit as we go, but that is how we are starting out. So all that information will be in the letter that is sent from your child's homeroom teacher if they have to quarantine. In Jupiter, on the days that your child has to be learning from home, you will see an M. That stands for mandated stay at home. And it is the same as a P. It is the same as being counted as present in school. If you have any questions, please email specific questions to your child's classroom teachers. And if you need a device for when your child is at home for learning, we're working to get some on hand in the front office that we can give you whenever you go home, and you would bring it back to us whenever you come back. Just make sure you're taking really good care of our devices at home. So we want to try to remove every barrier that we can to keep children learning from home. Next question. If my child has to quarantine and we want to test to come back early, what kind of test is required? There are provisions in the decision tree from the Florida Department of Education that a PCR test or a rapid PCR test is acceptable on day 5 of quarantine. If that test comes back negative, the child can return as soon as the results are back. If you do an at-home test or an antibody test, that is not an acceptable test to test negative to come back early from quarantine. It does have to be a PCR. Even a rapid PCR test is acceptable. I will tell you that many times the PCR test is taking longer than the required 7-day quarantine. And so if you decide to go test your child on day 5 and you don't have the results back from day 7, you actually have to stay home until you get the results back. Because anytime you have taken a COVID test, we are saying stay home until you get the results back. So actually testing on day 5 sometimes is extending the quarantine longer than if the child just waited out the 7 days and then came back on day 8. Trust me when I tell you, we are a school. We don't want to send kids home. We want them here, and we want them as long as we can keep them here, and we want them back as soon as we can get them. But I do feel compelled to tell you that sometimes those PCR tests are extending quarantines past the 7 days. So just be careful about that. If your child has been tested for COVID, keep in mind they cannot come to school until you have the results back. Please don't test them on a Monday and send them back and then call us on Wednesday and tell us that they are tested positive. Please keep them home till you have the results back. And you do not have to have a negative COVID test to send your child back from quarantine. This is only recommended if your child is symptomatic, but you do have to stay out the recommended days that we tell you whenever we call, and we are starting to follow that up with an email. How can your child avoid quarantines? Just know if we call you and tell you that your child has to quarantine, we are already sorry. We do not want to send kids home. We want to keep our kids here. We're a school. We're all about learning. We want our students here as long as possible. So please show us your patience and grace as we work through this process. We are working so hard behind the scenes, and we are doing the absolute very best we can each and every day. We are not perfect. We will make mistakes. It has been a lot for schools to process these last 2 weeks of school, but we are working very hard. So just know if we call you, we are sorry. We are sorry to be calling you and telling you that your child had close contact with a positive case. But if we call you and your child has been vaccinated, then you can tell us that. Your child does not have to quarantine if they've been vaccinated. We have a way we can look that up in the Florida shot record just to verify it for our purposes, but we would ask you to monitor your child for symptoms. And then if they show any symptoms, we would ask you to keep them home and get them tested. But if your child has been vaccinated, they will not have to quarantine. If your child has tested positive for COVID in the last 90 days and you can show us proof of that result, not an at-home test, then they do not have to quarantine as well. So those would be two things that you would need to tell us if we call you and say, hey, your child had close contact and they need to be picked up. Then those would be two important things to tell us over the phone. One note on that. If your child tests positive on an at-home test, I'm highly recommending that you go ahead and go get the PCR test. That's something that's sent off to a lab to have those results verified, because that is the only way that you can avoid a quarantine in the future. So if you are one of the poor, sweet families whose child has tested positive over these last 2 weeks, you need that result from a lab to be able to show us, say in October, if your child had a close contact. We don't want to send your child home. We want to keep them here for that 90-day period where we can avoid the quarantine, but you have to have a lab result to show us. So at-home tests may be great for kind of helping you determine next steps, but if your child tests positive in an at-home test, then you're going to want to follow up with a PCR test to verify those lab results so that you can use that in the future to avoid a quarantine. Just a tip. How are quarantines determined? They are done by close contact tracing, and close contact, as we have talked about, is defined by closer than 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes. We're only going to contact trace what happens here within the course of a school day. There's a lot of room for error in contact tracing. Again, we are doing our absolute very best. It has been a lot of work to do in the last 2 weeks, but we are working very hard. If you had contact with others outside of school on the weekend or outside of the school day, that would be up to you and the health department to let those people know about the positive exposure. Sibling quarantines can be very tricky because it all depends on whether the positive case in your home can self-isolate from everyone else, and that will change your return to school dates. These are not our guidelines. These are coming from the Department of Health and the Department of Education and the CDC. And so if you do have one child who tests positive and you're questioning on how long the sibling has to stay home, we're going to have the nurse call you to talk through those dates, because it all depends on whether the positive case self-isolates away from the rest of the siblings or not. And I know that that is difficult in a household. I can imagine with young children. I've been there and had 3 young children of my own, and I can imagine that that would be difficult to keep those cases apart. If you need to report a case, if you have someone else in your home who tests positive and you need to let us know that your child had a close contact and needs to stay home. If you just have questions, please email our COVID hotline at isl.support@imagineschools.org and we will get back to you. We're checking it first thing every morning, and we're reacting to those emails very first thing in the morning as soon as we have all the kids safely at school. And we're checking those throughout the day as well. So please email us at that hotline, even if it's on the weekend. We will get to those things first thing on Monday morning. And just wanted to share this decision tree you can find online. You can pause this and screenshot it. This is the COVID-19 systematic decision tree from the Florida Department of Education. These are the protocols if we have questions, because of course every case has a story. Every one of these cases we're reporting to you represents one of our warriors and a family who's going through something difficult. So Of course, it's not always just as easy to trace this on a decision tree, but if we have questions, we are contacting the Department of Education. I've been on the phone with them this week, and we are contacting the Department of Health. We've been on the phone with them multiple times this week just to make sure that we understand and we're doing the right things. One last reminder for you that has nothing to do with COVID. Yay, just like a normal school year, beginning of the school year thing. We send home those wonderful forms during open house or the first week of school to fill out. I know it is so much fun for you guys to do at home, especially if you have multiple children in the school and you get to do them 2 and 3 times. But I do need 100% of those forms returned. We do have to have those on file. We are audited on those to make sure that we have those things on file here. So please make sure you've returned those to your child's homeroom teacher, especially the new medical forms that went home through open house or the first week of school. We definitely need those completely filled out and returned to school. Let us know if you lost yours. It's okay. There's no shame in asking for an extra set. Just let us know and we will get it to you. And one last fun thing before we go. Do you have the book Mr. Popper's Penguins yet? We are going to start reading this as a school on September 7th, that week, first week of Labor Day. And we'll have a school-wide reading plan where we as a school are reading the same chapters each week together. We know that benefits of reading aloud to children are wonderful, but when a whole school community reads the same book, the benefits are multiplied. And so we are very excited about our One School, One Book fall novel study, Mr. Popper's Penguins. We'll be dedicating a page on our website to this so that if as a family you don't have time to do the reading aloud at home during the week, your child can hop on and listen to one of our staff members read some of these chapters to them. This will all be culminating into a big fun event on October 29th in the evening for our whole campus out on the field and outside. So mark that day on your calendar and there'll be more information coming. But if you didn't get your One School, One Book novels yet, we're starting with Mr. Popper's Penguins on September 7th, and I'm really excited about it. So make sure that you get these books in hands before Labor Day. All right, that is all that I have for you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your encouragement. Please keep sending it our way. And just know we are working so hard to make sure that we're managing all that we can as best we can. There's a lot coming at schools right now. None of us learned how to do this perfectly. We are all kind of learning as we go, but we will always keep trying. We will always keep showing great care and kindness in all that we do towards our families and our staff and our team. And so I just really appreciate the love and care and concern that many of you have reached out and shown us this week as well. And I hope that you all have a great weekend. Thanks.